Financial success is celebrated and wealth is glorified, but many people have been wounded in getting there or suffered its impacts on their relationships, mental health, and life purpose. I am your host, Richard Robinson. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and an alternative healing arts practitioner. Join me as I talk with people about their journey with money, how they came into it, how they have managed, and if they have recovered. Welcome to Healing Wounds of Wealth. Are you living a rich life? Hello and welcome once again to Healing Wounds of Wealth. Are you living a rich life? Today's podcast is with Aaron Young, CEO of Laughlin Associates, and it is a fascinating interview as he tells about an incredible journey of his life, which includes the very hard choice to go to prison for no crime that he committed, and what he learned, and how he's grown, and how he's changed, and who he is now. Please stay tuned. Please listen to this episode. It's fascinating. It's touching. Thank you for joining. Hello and welcome, Aaron Young. Thank you very much for being with us.
Oh my gosh.
During the interview during the intro, I reviewed CEO Laughlin Associates. I've got to ask, how'd you come up with that name for starters?
Well, Laughlin is the name of the founder. It was 29 years old when I bought it. So they'd already helped well over 100,000 companies by that point. And so even though the name meant nothing to me, it seemed like I better keep it. Okay. But I guess what did Google or Yahoo, none of those meant anything to us either when we first heard them. They became something.
Anyways, I just noticed the name. It sounds like laughing. And I thought, oh, is that an intention? Thank you very much for being with us today. And I appreciate it. We set this up and we've had a few chances to talk and drop in. And I've reviewed with you that the emphasis of our conversation, well, it's healing wounds of wealth. Are you living a rich life? And you have your share of stories that, as far as a person on the journey of being an entrepreneur, being a CEO, helping other people. And by the way, I really admire that the company obviously really helps a lot of smaller companies, a lot of people. I did look at it. It reviews abroad. It doesn't assume people know anything. It introduces all of the bases. And good for you for helping people expand and having just an orientation of doing, it appears to me, an orientation of doing good in the world.
Well, thank you for saying so. That's our goal. When I turned 50, I'm 62 now. When I turned 50, all my career, I'd had these ideas of, I want to, impact 1 million business owners, or, how you have these big numeric goals. And I got to 50, and by then we'd already done a lot. And I thought, you know what I want to do the rest of my life? I want to help as many companies stay in business for as many years as possible, making as much money as possible. Because I thought, whether they're a one-person company or an enterprise company, if they stay in business longer and make more money, they probably will hire more people or pay for better health insurance or sponsor a little league team or just do something good. And it didn't really matter how much I did anymore, as long as it could kind of roll down to help as many as possible. And so that actually made my life a lot happier when I quit worrying about hitting some number and I started looking at outcome instead of volume. And so thank you for suggesting that. The whole goal of the companies that we own is to help people achieve the goals they're trying to achieve.
Well, I really appreciate this conversation because from my point of view, that is the huge pivot point. Our society very much promotes making money for the purpose of making money. And a lot of people get lost along the way. And a lot of people, frankly, lose themselves along the way and end up doing or being something that they didn't plan on doing or being, or let themselves become something that they don't really admire and don't want to be. And it can get very sticky and very complicated. and putting your values. You say this specifically, you remember, I mean, I can't imagine you didn't have these things before 50, but something at 50, you chose to reorient your priorities about helping companies for the purpose of helping people do good in the world,
Yeah,
helping good
I
things happen.
yeah, I knew it could be less about me and more about whatever I'd learned up to that point and just moving it forward, even if the receiver never even heard of me or never will ever hear of me. Uh, it sounds like I'm some big fancy guy. I've just done a lot of things. I've been making a payroll for 43 years now. I've been an employer for a long time in a lot of companies, both private and public. And there's a lot that's happened. And some of that, I guess we'll talk about. And it all just boiled down to me that we need everybody in the system, but entrepreneurs create companies less than 100 employees create 86.3% of all the jobs in the country and about 83% of GDP. And so it's really important that small businesses have all the help they can get to survive because they're not going to get government bailouts typically. They're gonna have to just slug it out, and it takes a certain kind of person to keep taking those risks. And because it's risky, they get hurt sometimes. And the more we can help them avoid the pain, the pitfalls, the problems by sharing best practices, what we've learned along the path, I think that's good for everybody. It's good for the business owner. It's good for the employee. It's good for the little convenience store where they go in and buy a Diet Coke. It's just good for everybody if we help people be better at what they're doing and survive longer to do more in their community. That's my attitude. But like I said, there's risks that come along, and you referenced. You don't even know. I've told you one story, which maybe we'll get into here, but I mean, there have been things all the way along that have been really big challenges. And the trick is, can you overcome them? And if so, who are you at the other side of the problem? And
Right.
what do you choose to do? And do you choose to be cranky and cankered, or do you choose to go, oh, you know what? We can do something with this information.
Well, all of the above. And by the way, I just got a comment. The way you're talking, from my point of view, listening to you, you're speaking like an elder.
Well, look at all the gray hair.
Well, you've earned it. I mean, I know that. You've said you're 62 years old. But a lot of people can get to 62 and beyond and not own and step into the position of being an elder, the
Well, thank
position
you.
of being someone who has a calm, cool overview and is helping others. I mean, that's part of the magic of eldership. At a certain point, you give it away and you want to help others. It's not about promoting ourselves first anymore. It's about seeing the whole picture. And that's what eldership is for people who step into it. And you're speaking that way. So I'm just
Thank you. Well,
that.
I like to receive that and say thank you very much.
My pleasure. And you've spoken about, you've had your share of challenges. Of course, there's one that's quite pronounced. Where would you like to tell that story? Oh, I think the listeners would benefit a lot from hearing it. And of course, you have others as well.
Sure. So the story, I'm sure you're referring to, and because this program is designed specifically to deal with the wounds that come along, right? I'll just jump in. So yes, through a series of events that I thought were fantastic, I got my second company. I was early in the cellular phone business, 1986. By 1992 or really late 91. The big carriers wanted to utterly change how they delivered cellular service to the community. And in one meeting, they just pulled the rug out from under us and everything changed. So that's not the story I want to tell, but I'm going to say that I'd been entrepreneurial. Now I'm 28 and they ripped the rug out. I've got 5 locations. That all closes down one day. And I struggled, and to where I thought I could figure it out better than everybody else. I went through a bankruptcy, with my wife 9 months pregnant with our second child. She would have been like 25 years old. And so that was a woundy thing. But what happened after that, so now I'm like, oh shoot, what do? I don't have a college education. I've started the first recycling company in this city. I was one of the first cellular phone guys with multiple stores. And now I'm like, what do I do? And I got invited to lunch by a guy who wanted to offer me a job. And I subsequently took the job. It's a company that had 350 offices around the world, financial services, and they hired me at 29 to be their vice president of sales. So I thought, what a rinky-dink company that would hire a guy like me to be in charge of 350 offices. I'm 29. What are you guys thinking? Well, it turned out to be a pretty cool company. Less than a year after I came on board, we went public on NASDAQ, and I made a lot of money, or at least I accumulated a lot of wealth at that moment. And at 32, I just was bored with it. And I went to the CEO and said, I want to give my notice. And he said, well, if you give your notice, the founder, who I'd only met once, is going to call you because he's been watching your career. So I thought that was cool because I thought the founder guy was super cool. He'd written a lot of books, world traveler, archaeological stuff, lived in this 12,000 square foot fabulous home on 80 acres. I mean, the guy seemed like a great, example to me. So sure enough, the next day after I was finished at the vice president job, my one and only time I've been employed in all these years, I get a call from his assistant, and the next day, so 2 days after I quit, or after I am done with my 2 weeks, I'm having lunch with the founder, and he tells me that he has an offshore banking license, offshore insurance company license, trust company license, but no clients, no employees, no nothing. Would I write a business plan for him? Which I did. It included foreign stuff and domestic stuff, separate. And then he said, if I put some money up, would you start the domestic side? And if you can get it going, you run that, I'll run the offshore, and you feed me clients as appropriate, which I did. And it became successful. And we ended up with many dozens of law firms that were vetting clients. And we would only take business from a lawyer, not directly from the customer. And I ended up with people, and I had half a floor on the 26th floor of the tallest building in Oregon. And I just, I was very snazzy. And then I started watching the guy, and I started getting uncomfortable with him. And so on the last day of 1999, we severed ties. So we'd gone from 97 to 99. I said, okay, we're done. And I got rid of anything related to offshore and all those lawyers. We had purchased the Nevada Incorporation service by then. It was doing well. I'd actually picked up 2 or 3. And then anyway, all that was going on. I'd ended it with here. I was focusing on domestic asset protection services. And Christmas, actually December 27th, 2002. So basically 3 years after I'd cut that off, while I was here at this house, it was our very first time staying in this house that we had built. I get a call that the FBI and the IRS criminal enforcement are in my office in downtown Portland, the 26th floor. And I got on the phone and I said, special agent in charge, what's going on? And is this about me or my companies or anything? Nope, just anything to do with that guy and his companies. You're not a person of interest. There's nothing for you to worry about. We do want to open your safe. And I said, well, I knew this was not long after Y2K, and we had about $500,000 in gold and silver in the safe. So I didn't want somebody inventorying my gold and silver, So I said, can you give me 2 hours? I'll come down, I'll open the safe. They said, sure. So I come down, did that. They're like, just sit in your office. We're going to go through everything. I'm sure this is freaky, scary, but it'll be over soon and, whatever. So, okay. So I'm doing that. And then this very nice special agent comes in and says, Mr. Young, this guy's been so, slick, so hard to pin down. Would you mind answering just a couple of simple questions? And I'm like, sure, because I thought so too.
This is the moment.
This is the moment. So I'm like,
yes,
sure.
It just says it. When you should have called your lawyer.
Look, I'm an Eagle Scout.
Of course.
I grew up in the Mormon church. I was a Mormon missionary out there with my white shirt, my little badge, and my 10-speed. I've been married to the same woman for 39 years. I've never had problems. And I thought I was doing the right thing.
Of course you did.
Anyway, so can I ask you a few questions? They were inane questions, But then I called my lawyer after they left, and he's like, "You need a criminal defense lawyer. You didn't talk to them?" I said, "Well, only for like 2 hours." And they're like, "You got to do this." So I get a criminal defense lawyer. He checks in, goes, "No, you're not a person of interest. You'll be fine." April, so 4 months later, he calls me and he says, "Now don't freak out. You're not going to be arrested, but you are being indicted on conspiracy. They say you either knew or should have known what this other fellow and his businesses were doing." And I said, "Well, I never conspiracy to defraud the IRS." I said, "But we never conspired. If anything, we were like sending out all this stuff to make sure everybody followed the rules." They said, "Well, whatever. They think you conspired." And I said, "Well, I never conspired." And this is interesting, Richard, and your audience needs to hear this, because this is, file this one away. They said, conspiracy doesn't mean you conspired. It just means you did something to materially assist. So they know you don't know of any crime, but they believe you materially assisted by filing these, gathering these packages and sending them off from the lawyers to the trust company. Well, I thought, well, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. How can I be in trouble for something I didn't know about that wasn't illegal? Well, anyway, 3.5 years and $2 million later, we got to the point that our lawyers told us at the beginning, which was, you can't win. The IRS convicts 99.3% of anybody it indicts. 99.3%. You cannot win. You have to mitigate the risk. So they'd wanted, the sentencing guidelines for the alleged number was 12 to 15 years. Well, I was in my early, how old was I? 30. By the time I was 38 when it started.
How many kids?
Four, plus we had another girl that had moved in when she was in 6th grade for 2 weeks, but she stayed for 6 years till we took her to college. We put on her wedding. We did we had 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
You're 32. You got 5 kids in your house. You're caring for your wife and 5 kids. And by the way, I just to pick up a detail, you said 3.5 years and $2 million later in litigation. Whose $2 million was that? Who paid for the litigation? Just to be clear.
Yeah.
It wasn't a company write-off. It wasn't an insurance claim or something. Your money, you paid your lawyers $2 million over 3.5 years, and they come to you and say 99.3% conviction rate.
Yeah. So
and you're looking at 12 to 15 years with a wife and 5 kids.
So I basically said, I'll do a plea bargain, and they offered me 7 years. And this is my business partner too, same time. We both were getting similar treatment, different charges, but similar. So 7 years, 6 years, because I said I'm going to go to trial. Oh, let me tell you, once we'd spent the money we had, the lawyers tried to get out of having to represent us. Mm-hmm. The judge said, "No, you're in it for the long haul." So then they got pretty pissed off, and I said, "We're going to go to trial." This whole time I've been trying to avoid a trial. Now I know they can't get out of it, and I don't have any more money, so we're going to have to play chicken with the government. So we're going to go to trial. Now nobody wants to go to trial, right? The judge, the prosecutor, the defense lawyers, none of them want to prep for a trial. And I just said, trial. Now believe me, I'm shaking in my boots the whole time. I'm freaking out that my life is over. But that was the only plan I could come up with, is just keep playing chicken. So they offered 7 years, 6 years, 5 years, 4 years. Then they said 3 years is it. It's the least we're going to offer. And by the way, and I said, I'm not going to plead guilty to conspiracy, because no matter what your definition is, anybody I know will think that I was plotting to help people cheat on their taxes. I'm not going to say that, because I never did that. They said, well, you can plead guilty to anything you want as long as it has a 36-month charge. So
who's they, by the way?
Prosecutor, the U.S. attorney.
Okay. The U.S. attorney for the IRS.
The DOJ representing the Internal Revenue Service, yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I found something. They didn't think it would work because it was too thin, but the judge accepted it, I think kind of grudgingly. He literally said, wait a minute, did you own that? No. Did you get a commission? No. Did you benefit in any way for what you're pleading guilty for? And I said, no. And he said, and you want to plead guilty to that? And I said, yes. And he literally, Chief Justice of the federal court in Portland, Oregon, literally goes like this. Okay, He like threw his hands up. It was so cliche. He's like, okay. So anyway, we ended up when we got to sentencing, the judge actually kind of reprimanded the IRS and the DOJ and said, I'm trying to reconcile what these two men are accused of versus everything else in their life. That's in the public record. I'm not making that up. You can go read the transcripts. That's what the judge said. Trying to reconcile this. So I'm going to go ahead and dispense the sentence. And they wanted to bring some witnesses to underscore the severity. And he said, well, I've already made up my mind what we're going to do, but if you'd like to waste the court's time, you can call your witness. And they were like, nope, never mind, because they got to see that judge again this afternoon, right? So they're like, okay, cool, you're done, we're done. And off we went to prison. So we'd agreed to 36. He cut it down to 18, and from 5 years probation to 1 year of what they call administrative probation. And there was no restitution or, there was no fraud or anything involved. So it was just time. So off 18-month sentence means you serve 14 months and 1 week at the facility. And then you have about 5 weeks of halfway house. And then the remaining time is just probation. And then through your 1 year. So that's what I did. I went off to minimum security and had quite an interesting experience, met a lot of people, heard a lot of stories of people that I would have, up to that point, would have crossed the street to not walk past them. Pretty interesting, sort of scary looking people. What you find out in a circumstance like that, when all the societal challenges are gone, people are people who have done dangerous or heavily drug related or whatever things. They're just mostly just people who are either opportunists or had lived a really awful life, a horrible life. And this is where they ended up. And so, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you something. People have asked me, what was the biggest lesson you learned from being in prison? And I said, the ladder that we all climb, to the success or accomplishment ladder we talk about. Well, I was further up the ladder than pretty much anybody I met, but I don't know if I'd made as much progress on the ladder as some of the people I met, because I came from a happy family, from parents who loved me, from being surrounded by extended family and friends and church. And I had it pretty good. And not to mention, anyway, I was born into low income but high support circumstances. And a lot of these people had been born into families that would just as soon, burn them with a cigarette for not taking the garbage out as anything, really ugly stuff. So anyway, we did that. And if you want to ask me any questions about that, I can, because I'm kind of just giving you the story arc.
No, I appreciate it. And please continue. You're getting into what lessons did you learn? And I want to give you space for that.
The greatest lesson I learned was that most people, so there were a number, one of the things I learned in there was how to spot which gang somebody was from and what their drug of choice was.
Okay.
So, and it took me a while coming back out to kind of lose that focus, because I would notice somebody in the grocery store line and go, oh, that's a Norteño, or that's a Peckerwood, or somebody, or, oh, that person's on cocaine, that's a meth person, that person drinks too much. Because I became super aware of that in there to try to scan and figure out what was going on with people. So that was one thing. The people that I met, by and large, when you get them out of a gang situation, out of a kind of a circumstance where they're being held down in some way, because if you get a criminal record, it's hard to get an apartment. It's hard to get a job. It's hard to do a lot of things. The system doesn't let people come out very easily and get their legs under them. And so they become a repeat offender, or they go right back into it because they don't have a choice a lot of times. And it maybe sounds like I'm a bleeding heart. I'm not. I was always all for the death penalty. I was always for harsher sentencing. Then I got in there and thought, I don't know the hell I'm talking about. I was clueless about these people because of the world I lived in. I talked to somebody one time, and he was telling me, he said, you don't even live in the real world, Aaron. I said, I live in the real world. I just live in a different world than you do. And I think we forget that the more success. I look at the two of us, we're both in very favorable circumstances here. And we're talking on a podcast and we're talking about the wealths of, or the wounds of wealth. And I'm like, you can very easily not understand the plight of people that are right a few blocks away from you. And you get into prison and you find out these people mostly have had the crummiest life I could ever imagine, almost worse than I can imagine for some. So I learned, one, listen to people's stories, figure out where they're coming from, not just how they're acting in the moment, but what, the best salesperson I ever hired in my whole career, the best guy I ever hired for sales, came in an ill-fitting suit with a kind of like a chip on his shoulder. He was a house painter. And I said, why do you want to go into business services sales? He said, I don't want to climb up that ladder anymore. I don't want to be up there on that ladder in the heat or in the cold. I'm just so sick of it. I'll do anything to change my life. Well, a lot of these people that are in prison, they desperately want to change their life. One of the big things about release is please don't release me back to where you picked me up. Let me go to where I've got an uncle or something so I don't go back where the gang members are going to pull me right back in. Like as a threatening thing, you will come back, So it's really, so it's the things here's another thing I learned. And the way that even at minimum security, I stayed safe. I didn't know any of this stuff. So I just looked at people and thought, well, we're all here together. Not I'm better than you, just I'm here too. I had to mentally say, this is my address now. My name is 67015, right? I mean, that's who I am here. And by doing so, I quit separating myself from the rest of the guys. And I started figuring out, what can I do here to be helpful? The first day I was at the camp, they put me in as a GED tutor. And I realized within the first day, many of these people can't read. And so after a few weeks, I went to the woman in charge of education and I said, is it possible to give me a little corner somewhere away from everybody and you pick them or they can volunteer and I'll teach these guys to read. They'll never be able to progress in GED if they can't read. About a week later, she said, I worked it out. You've got the visiting room. You'll have somebody every 30 minutes for the what would be 3 90-minute segments, class times. So you have 9 people a day and you'll work with them till they pass a certain thing. Then I'll put somebody else in their spot. I did that for the rest of the time I was there. Talk about gratifying, talk about great, but also to, I could just start telling you stories and I don't know if we have time for all the stories. The thing is, people given an opportunity, for the most part, not everybody, but in my life experience, somebody who doesn't seem to fit the mold, but has a want, has a drive, and is given an opportunity to at least try, tend to be pretty good at changing who they are. If we all grew up watching Eddie Murphy in Trading Places, right? Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, and all of a sudden the hustler on the street, gets put into the Wall Street and he's wildly successful.
Yes, and likewise, the guy who was the high-end hoity-toity, Dan Aykroyd, actually really, really spiraled.
He sure did.
I want to come back to, I appreciate I loving the passion that you have for your experience. I want to summarize. Okay?
Sure.
Would that be all right? And I'll summarize and you say if I'm on point, okay?
Okay.
Sure. And where I'm not, please help fill it in.
Yeah.
You chose. You could have continued fighting the IRS. In your worldview of yourself and the hierarchy of reality and everything, you had nothing to go to prison about. You had nothing to hide. You did nothing wrong. And yet there you were in this quagmire. As you said, 2 million and 3.5 years later, you made a choice. I'm going to cut the bleeding. I'm going to serve time and put this behind me and move on.
Yeah.
So first, let's just pause with that, okay? Because you're so accustomed to it. But for the listeners, somebody's going, holy crap, right? And a man with 5 children, a wife and 5 children, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay. And so it comes down to 14 months plus. And you choose that. Okay, knowing that you have a life, It's a choice, and you have a life in front of you, and somebody's always, whatever you were thinking at that age, early 30s, mid 30s at that point, and what am I going to do? How am I get? Well, yes, you were very employed and all the rest, but what a complicated formula. So we're just being with that. That is not an average day at work, dear, right?
No, no.
And not kind of and I've spoken to people who faced bankruptcy. Your early part of your story was that the rug was pulled out. You were your own man. The rug was pulled out of you, out from underneath you, and you spun it very quickly. You flipped that script very quickly into something, finding your balance, finding your new direction. And though that's a wound, that's hard. You built it. You're young, right? And then you go forward, and holy, what kind of company would hire me? Sounds like Groucho Marx, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me. Yeah,
As a member, yeah, that have something like me as a member, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
And I said that to a client once. He was living that for real. And anyways, and then go forward into the choosing the prison thing, and now you're sharing, because it just opens up all this passion for you. There's a couple different things that I want to name. One is it taught you a very different worldview than the one you had.
Yes.
It taught you humility. With being exposed to that different worldview, you realized the privileges that you had were not specifically financial. You said you didn't grow up in like
No. Dad worked 2 jobs. Mom did daycare at home. I had to learn how to make money young if I was going to have anything, and I was the oldest of 5. So
right.
yeah, I had to get clever quick.
But high on support, and high on love, and
Very high
values and spirituality, and people were there for you, and you could show up as you were, and all of these things. That was the dead opposite, the polar opposite of the people that you were meeting in prison. You were exposed to something, and it taught you humility, especially for somebody who's been so successful on your own, right? Being able to see when people say the other side of the tracks. It's not just people living in a very financially different environment. It's people with tremendous struggles that people on the other side of the fence can't imagine. I heard people just be very, very critical of people saying you can pick yourself up by your bootstraps. It's the American dream. Well, it doesn't really work that way, and for everybody, not by far. And so the humility and and in there. Like, remember at the beginning of our conversation, I was appreciating you for orienting your businesses to ultimately, either directly or indirectly, do good in the world, make the world a better place. And that's how you got through your prison time.
It's a life attitude. It really is. We're going to be confronted throughout our life with circumstances that are just real and they're in front of us. And how we address them will determine our happiness. It will determine the path. You know, I love that the whole poem of The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Yes, everybody knows the very end of it. Mm-hmm. You know, and I took the road less traveled by, and that's made all the difference. They don't know the first 3 stanzas that basically say we've come to a crossroad or a fork, and we're looking down both sides, and really they're both just untouched. They're just waiting for us to try. That's what the first 3 stanzas are. That in both that morning evenly lay and leaves no step had trodden black, right? And we have to make a choice. And often it's not right or wrong. It's what are we going to do with this moment? And we'll look back with a sigh, as Robert Frost says, and see this weird circuitous path we took. So when we look at it in a way that is, how can this be as good a circumstance for as many people as possible versus how can I just get what I want at every minute? And I'm not trying to be overly philanthropic. I'm just saying if my business is all about helping as many business owners as I possibly can to become more successful, I promise you they will all still want to be my customers. When I was in prison and I helped as many people as I could to learn to read or to write their life sketch, 50 pages of their life for the drug and alcohol program, which could remove a year from their sentence. When I helped people do that, do you think anybody out there was going to let anything happen to me. Any gang guy that would get pissy, anybody that would get mad out on the yard. No, I didn't realize till later I was fully insulated from any trouble because the people I'd been teaching and helping were like, well, no, leave him alone. Go mess with somebody else. I was unaware of it for most of the time I was there.
Right. So I want to pick up on that.
Yeah.
Unawareness. And that's a theme in our conversation, that you were unaware of the risks you were taking when you were just working for that guy. And then when you just answered some questions to a cop, oh, I'll just answer, of course, I'll just answer, and then call your lawyer, right?
Yeah.
And the naivete, right? And then going in and the unawareness of how so many other people live their lives. And so I asked you, what are the lessons? It sounds like it's a much broader worldview, a much broader life experience than you ever would have had in your own trajectory.
Yeah, yes, and it actually has informed how I think I always treated people kindly and thoughtfully. I strove to do that. I continue to strive to do it. However, there were certain people that I would kind of sum up and go, worth my time, not worth my time. That has changed a lot to the point where I think it has maybe negatively impacted my financial growth, but has dramatically improved my life experience. I've been less about rushing for more gain and more about going, ooh, what can we develop here? Ooh, what can we do for this little group? Oh, I want to spend more time with this person. There's no money in it. I just want to get to know them better.
Boom. You know? Boom. So we're going to wrap up soon. We're running out of time. And now you're coming into different aspects of the lessons and how you changed, how it changed you, how you changed into, well, it sounds like somebody that you prefer being.
I do. Can I tell you the other thing? I grew up in a time period and also within our church, the one I attended for 50 years, the LDS church, that was very patriarchal. Well, while I was there, my partner said, the only person I feel comfortable leaving in charge, and we had the founder of WebMD, we had the CFO of Intel, who were both our dear friends, who both said, I'll look after the company, no pay, I'll make sure it's okay. He said to me, the only person I feel comfortable with is Michelle, is your wife. She was a stay-at-home mom, but she was smart and tough and would do things that needed to be done. And she said, I don't know anything about running your business. And I said, the team knows how to run the business. You just need to listen and see if you think they're giving you the straight story, and then make the final decisions on big things. Well, coming out of that and seeing how successful she was gave me a whole different perspective. So we went from being kind of this kind of a relationship to this kind of a relationship. And that now has been 20 years of that. And let me tell you, I can't even really fully express verbally how happily married I am. We've just had our 39th anniversary. That not only, welds you together or tears you apart or welds you together, but also I learned things about my team and about my spouse that fundamentally changed how I looked at what I had to do, what I could share, where I could listen and be the student instead of always trying to be the one that was supposed to know what to do. My whole life got better. And the other interesting thing, as the wounds heal, because my business stayed together, because my team stayed together, because my business partner stayed together, because my marriage stayed together, and it all worked, where I thought my business career was over, who's ever going to trust this felon? Instead, it opened up all new rooms to me. I got invited up into new echelons that I'd never even thought I could get into the room, because people said, oh, we see how your life is and how you handle pressure. Come over here and work with us. And that has, I say maybe it's hurt me financially, some of the things. I have not suffered financially. I've done just fine. Thank you very much. We live a beautiful, abundant, wonderful life, but it's not driven by the relentless pursuit of money. It's about how do we relentlessly pursue doing positive things in our chosen space. And that, what a shocker, has brought abundance back to us. I've learned to believe that if you chase money, money runs away. If you welcome it, invite it, be willing to accept it when it shows up, that's a better way for me. And so, yeah, as crummy as it was to go through all that, as much as it did impact my young children, my spouse, it impacted a lot of people that loved me and cared about me. Everybody came through it okay. The family's doing well. We talk about hard things because we've been through hard things. And it has created a much more adult to adult cohesive life within our family. And everybody knows that hard things do not wipe you out. Hard things, you just go through them, and there's something at the other side that's going to be positive. It's a pretty big, it's a huge benefit we've received by going through the thing that I never, ever imagined I would ever have to go through.
So we're about to wrap up. I mean, this is amazing. And if we had more time, we certainly would have more interesting things to talk about. Couple questions just to wrap up with. One, do you have any advice for other people on this subject of wounds of wealth? Are you living a rich life?
Yeah. Figure out what you're really naturally great at, and then do it in all circumstances. Figure out, don't try to be everything to everybody, but if you can be really good at a couple of things, and you can do that for business, you can do it for your family, you can do it for strangers, you can do it for nonprofits, you can do it in prison, odds are, not only are you living a life of integrity, but odds are you will rise up in any circumstance you're in. But you need to be true to who you really are. And if you're a crummy person, you're going to just be crummier in a bad situation. If you're a good person, you're probably just going to be good in a bad situation. And in positive times, you're going to do very well. So just be true to yourself and live a life of integrity. Don't be somebody different behind closed doors.
And my last question, and I know the answer. I don't need to ask it. The listeners, the viewers, they know the answer. But I just developed this, and I enjoy it very much, asking, Aaron, are you living a rich life?
I'm living a life that I don't even think I could have imagined when I was younger. The life is rich because of the scars, because of the overcoming, and because of the people along the path. And that has made, do you feel a lot of people choke up when you ask that? Because it's getting me. Yeah, it's been a very marvelous trail that I've been able to follow that has put me here in a way that I'm a happy person. And I find myself surrounded by really wonderful people near and at arm's length. So yeah, that's a very rich life.
I want to share with you that you're an inspiration. As much as sure you have all this professional experience and the entrepreneurial and so many businesses and however much wealth generation for yourself and others. But sure, that's real. But you're inspiration because of who you are and who you made yourself into personally.
Well, Richard, thanks for sharing my story and others so that people can get through hard times.
That's the point. That's the point of the podcast.
Yeah. Good for you. Thanks for having me on.
And thank you very much to Aaron Scott Young for joining us today. And thank you to the listeners for listening. And this is another episode of podcast Healing Wounds of Wealth. Are you living a rich life? Thank you. Thank you for listening to Healing Wounds of Wealth. If this topic speaks to you, follow the podcast and share it with others who are navigating money, health, and quality of life. Visit the show website at healingwowpodcast.com for more resources and information on my psychotherapy and life-centered therapy work. Remember, money should not limit you. It should help you live a rich life.